and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then just welcome to my channel. Please hit that like and subscribe button so you can watch future videos with me and Murders and Chill. My name is Aileen and I like to tell true crime stories on the weekly, and I am so sorry that it's been a little while since I've recorded. It's just been a little crazy, to be honest, 4th of July and all that. And before I do get into the story, I am very excited because look at my hair. I've got purple going on in here. So fun, so purple. I love it. Love, love, love. I wanted to do it for years and I never did because, I just kind of grew up in a strict household. So I was very excited to be able to do it for myself. So tidbit there. And I also want to go ahead and give a trigger warning before I do start this video. This video does include child abuse, sexual abuse, I'll be saying SA for short, incest, and people unaliving themselves. So if this is something you don't think you can handle, totally understand. I hope to, have you at my next video though, because not all of my videos are going to go ahead and include all of those triggers. So now that all of that is out of the way, let's get into the story. Today's story, we are going to be talking about a woman by the name of Aileen Wuornos. Now, she is a big case. I've got to say, a big kahuna, because she was all over the media for such a long time. I believe a movie was even done in portrayal of her. I believe it was called Monster, done by Charlize Theron. She did it to a T. She won an Academy Award for it, and let me just say, it is well deserved. But going back to Aileen, she was one of the first serial killers in the state of Florida. The death of these victims were from the year span of November 1989 and November 1990. Now, all of these men, total of 7 men, but only 6 were found. But all of these men were just dumped in a forest like trash. So sad. I don't know about them. I really don't. I don't know exactly if they were good men necessarily, but I don't know that they necessarily needed to be killed either. So yeah. We'll get into that. And with Aileen, it's kind of hard because with her background, it makes you kind of wonder, about the nature and nurture of people and just, what you think exactly. So what I'm going to do first is tell you a little bit more about Aileen's background so you can kind of get an idea as to, what she came from. Aileen Wuornos was born on February 29th, 1956. Now, she had kind of a bad upbringing because at 6 months old, she was abandoned by her mother. And Aileen also had a brother named Keith, who she was, kind of close in age with, I think by a couple years. And she also had a sister, according to Aileen, but we didn't really get a lot of information about her, But anyway, going on back to the story. So, because the mom abandoned all those children, the grandparents ended up having to step in and adopt all those children. You would think that their father would go ahead and kind of step up and take care of the kids, but no, he was getting into trouble himself. He went ahead and got thrown in prison, and it was for SAing an 8-year-old boy. That's so sad. But one good thing that came out of it, and normally I wouldn't say something like this, but when you do things like this to children, you have a special place in hell. He unalived himself. Okay, bye. I normally would never say anything like that, but just like I said, people who hurt children are just awful and they don't deserve to live. So there's my tangent, but we will continue. So even though she was living with her grandparents, it wasn't exactly the better though, because her grandfather would beat the crap out of the whole family. She would get in trouble and he would just do horrible things. For example, she would get in trouble and he would throw her into the sauna that they had, shut the door, and crank up the heat. What an awful human being. And there was rumors that she was beat with a belt for 5 minutes straight. No one would help her. It was just rumors from kids around the town, and they didn't do anything. She was just stuck there, and nobody did anything to help her. And when things like this happen as a child, when you're abused, a lot of times you don't want to be home. You just want to find any reason not to be home. Then that way you won't have to deal with, your grandparents. So she knew that in life she was going to have to just find out ways to get the things she wanted, because she wouldn't ask her grandparents. They would just say no and maybe hit her. But because she grew up in kind of a drug-related environment, and they would go ahead and just have drugs and cigarettes and everything around, when she was 9, she decided to start giving blowjobs for cigarettes when she was 9. This poor child. And as she grew up, she was about 13, and she started actually having sex with boys in the neighborhood. And the girls around just kind of thought she was trash, and, guys would go ahead and, be dumb too, and just be like, oh my gosh, she's such trash. I don't love her either, blah, blah, blah. And then they turn right around and pay her for sex. She's getting a bad rep. The guys are just kind of like, she's sort of slutty, and, they wanted to go ahead and ride the village bicycle, essentially. And they would just pretend, not to know her, not to like her, but then they would turn around and pay her for sex. Wow. And what's even worse is that they had a rumor going around that Keith, her brother, and her had sex as well. Yuck. Guys, this is not Game of Thrones. Anyway, moving on. Unfortunately, when she was 13, she was actually raped as well by one of her grandfather's friends, the local pedophile named Chief. And when this happened, her grandfather blamed her. What a terrible fucking human being. And when that happened, she also got pregnant. Oh my. So that didn't look very good for her. They kind of just sent her away for a while to have a baby, and then they made her give up her baby boy for adoption. That's so sad. I bet you anything, maybe she wanted to keep it, but I don't know. I'm not Aileen, but Aileen isn't around anymore. I'll get there. After giving up the baby, she was seen as worse than what she was before. She was like an untouchable. Nobody wanted to go around her, not even like in a secretive kind of way. They just were ashamed of her and, threw rocks at her and all kinds of awful stuff. And when she turned 16, her grandmother died. And when this happened, her grandfather pretty much blamed all the kids, and he threw them all out. Now, with her brother Keith and probably her sister, I'm not sure, they were able to go ahead and, hook up with other friends or with other neighbors and just stay with them for a little while, which was good. But unfortunately, a lot of them said, you could stay, you can't bring Aileen. This poor girl, she's just 16 and nobody wanted her. That's heartbreaking. But we're going to move on with the story. So, because Aileen, couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything, no one would take her in, she had no choice but just to be homeless. And when she was homeless, she actually decided to go ahead and live in the forest that was, I believe just down the street from where they lived. And she lived there for 2 years. This is Michigan. It snows. And she would just hitchhike and prostitute herself in order to get money and, get blankets and pillows. And, she would even hitchhike to the nearest gas station so she could go ahead and clean herself up, use the water to wash her hair. As I said, in Michigan, it snows, and after a while, she's just like, I can't do this anymore. It is too cold. So she started hitchhiking and prostituting again throughout the U.S., but then eventually she landed in Daytona, Florida, the Sunshine State. So she figured she could just kind of settle there and be warm and, get regular, so then that way she could just live in motels, which she was doing. And I believe when she was 20, she actually got married to a 69-year-old man named Louis Fell. He was the president of a coal company, so he made pretty good money. But they were only married for about a month because of her quick and short temper. She actually ended up beating him with his own walking stick. So anytime they had any kind of argument, she would just hit him. Like, oh my God, this is one, just gross, and because of age. Two, you're hitting an old man. Wild to me. And from there, she left him, or they left each other, they moved on. But then, she meets a girl by the name of Tyria Moore, and I'll call her Ty throughout the rest of this video because that's just how she went by. Everyone called her Ty. And she met Ty at a bar, fell deeply in love with each other. And after a while, they were just, two peas in a pod, and they lived together for 3 years in random motels, and they would just, party, drink beer. They were happy, I guess, so whatever. And Aileen had actually tried to turn her life around a little bit and find a job and, not prostitute anymore. She wanted to change things. But she had felonies. She had been convicted of DUIs, robbery, assault, forgery of checks, just one thing after another. So no place would hire her. Makes sense, but that sucks, especially when you're trying to get your life around. So she basically just had to go back to prostituting. I guess between the two of them, they had a role of man and woman, and Aileen was more the man, the breadwinner, and Tyria just didn't have a job, so she was more the submissive wife type. And Aileen just went back to prostituting. She said pretty much, she's done it her whole life, so she'll just keep doing it for money. So she's doing this, fine, whatever, but she's having to do it a lot to keep up with their lavish lifestyle. Okay. And she had regulars for such a long time, but now she's having to go get more strangers out in the world to go ahead and get extra money. She gets picked up by this man by the name of Richard Mallory. Now, they are going to the forest off of I-75. They, are about to have sex in the car. And this is according to Aileen, before she knew it, he had punched her in the face and tied her arms on the steering wheel and started to take rubbing alcohol and pour it on her rectum because she was going to get SA'd in the butt. I was just like, this guy. But she said, luckily, this didn't end up happening because she was actually able to kind of twist her way out of the ties, and she was able to reach into her bag. She was able to pull out a high standard 9 .22 caliber gun, and she shot him multiple times. And this must have been tragic and terrifying for her if it actually happened. I couldn't believe it. So, shot him multiple times, hit his body, took the car, took everything that he had. Because, he had money and everything else, so she just took it. So, came home, and for a little while she didn't say anything to Ty, but eventually she did end up telling her, yes, I did go ahead and kill this man because he tried to SA me. And Ty decided to kind of keep it quiet for a little while, just because I'm sure she loved her and didn't want to say anything for a while. And also, the fact that she kept going, Aileen kept going and kept killing men and taking their car and getting all of their money to just keep up with their lavish lifestyle. They were not that fancy. But okay, when she went to go move on to the next person, they would just get rid of the car and they would wipe all the fingerprints so then that way nothing was attached to them. And they were just able to do it for so long. Well, Aileen was. Ty wasn't. She was, just doing whatever it was she was doing at a motel, doing nothing, whatever. And I really think that once Aileen got away with the murder of Richard Mallory, her first victim, that she got a taste for it. And once that taste happened, she just found it easier to just go after one victim after another, to just bring them back to the forest, shoot them, take their car and all their money, and then just go back to Ty. They could go on to the next motel and just stay there. Like I said, wipe the fingerprints off and just use the car for a little bit and, dump it, and just one after another kind of thing. And it was just crazy. After a while, though, I mean, you can't hide from everybody forever, right? So in the span of 1 year, she picked up all of these men because, she would hitchhike, but she would tell these men that she had 2 kids and she really just needed money to get back to them. And, that she would go ahead and kind of work out a deal for him or whatever, prostitute herself, And then every time she would take him to the forest, shoot him, and take everything. She claimed this whole time that this was self-defense, that all of these victims were self-defense. That's what she said from the get-go, so remember that. And now I'm going to give you a list of all the victims: Richard Mallory, Walter Antonio, David Spears, Charles Carsden, I hope I'm saying that right, Peter Sim, Troy Burgess, and Charles Humphrey. Now we're going to talk about basically how they got caught. They have cars, they're stealing them from this person, and they have Peter Sim's car. And they are just driving it around. At this point, Ty is driving the car and Aileen's in the passenger seat. They actually get into a car accident. And when they get out, there's people who saw them who were kind of coming up to them like, "Hey, are you okay?" And they were like, "Oh, we're fine, not suspicious at all." And from here, they took the car, because they could still kind of move it, pulled the Florida plates from the car, and just booked it out of there, leaving all kinds of fingerprints. Interesting. And when they had crashed, the people who came up and saw them, they actually called the police later, which was smart, and they gave a description of the 2 girls to a sketch artist, and they went ahead and plastered it all over the news, because when they found those fingerprints, they were able to match it to Aileen Wuornos due to forensic science. And it's just crazy. I guess just in that rush, she just didn't wipe down the prints, and that's how they caught her. But, when Ty saw this all over the TV, she panicked. She was freaking out. So at this point, they separated, and Ty went to Pennsylvania to stay with her parents, and Aileen stayed in Florida. It was just kind of keep her head down until this blew over. She was heartbroken, though, that Ty had to leave. She loved her, and it was her family, and she just felt so alone. Now, because of the fingerprints, they knew exactly who they were looking for. And they, just kind of looked her up and was just trying to find Aileen, and they did. They found her at Last Resort bar in which she normally frequented. She was arrested by an undercover cop on January 9th, 1991. And at this point, all they really had on her specifically was some outstanding warrants from the past. And so she just was not saying anything, she was playing it smart at that time. But then the cops found Ty in Pennsylvania and arrested her as well. But Ty decided to work with the cops and became a state witness so that way she could go ahead and work on putting Aileen in jail. Way to betray the love of your life. Just, that's awful. And when she got on the phone with Aileen when she was in prison, she actually ended up getting Aileen to go ahead and confess to the murder on the phone, and she got her to go to the cops and confess the murder of Richard Mallory. And if you listen to the tape, it is so... I just couldn't believe that Ty would do this. It's just heartless. She is telling Aileen all this stuff like, the cops are coming to my parents' house and I'm really scared. I don't want to go to jail, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I don't even know if I want to live anymore. And of course, this makes Aileen scared. So like I said, she goes, talks to the cops. And, she just kind of says, hey, it's just me. She's not putting, Ty's name out there at all when she confesses. It's just her. So a little while later, they take Aileen to Richard Mallory's trial. And from here, she didn't exactly get a fair trial. I mean, yes, she did this and everything, but given her trial, it was just a hot mess is what it was. She got on the stand and told the story of why she did what she did to Richard Mallory, because of the SA. And the prosecution lawyer brought up the fact that she was being investigated for the other 6 murders. You are not supposed to do that. You are supposed to go ahead and be there for the one murder, to talk about the one murder. And it just ruined her chances. And not only did that happen, but her lawyer was bad too, because her lawyer didn't even mention the fact that Richard Mallory in the past was being investigated for the past however many years on sexually assaulting people. That would have been a good thing to mention in the trial, don't you think? Anyway, so given all of this, the jury flat out, you were guilty. That was it. That was it for her. And she had a right to appeals, but she went into her appeal and then still guilty, and then the judge sentenced her to death. And when she found out that Ty was responsible for the phone call that caught her to confess, she was heartbroken. Like I said, only person she ever loved, and she betrayed her. It's so sad. She was found guilty, and then she went nuts. She was just saying things like, I'm innocent, you people are awful, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, that's, what you would think. But she came back for her appeal, was trying to go ahead and get everything situated, but still nothing got done for her, and she was guilty with a death sentence. And then she lost her shit. She was going ahead and yelling at the jury, flipping off the judge, and she was saying things like, I hope you and your children get SA'd, only she used the R word, in the ass. I was like, my God. And she had these crazy looks, like deranged face and crazy ass hair. She had black eyes, and I don't know if you've ever seen that movie Jaws, but there's a quote, that was written in the movie. He described this shark, but it kind of reminded me of Aileen. She had black eyes, lifeless eyes, doll's eyes, and dolls scare the shit out of me. Dolls are, especially the porcelain ones, terrifying. I don't like it. And this was such a big case that so many people just kind of wanted an in with her, especially the way she reacted to, getting sentenced to the death penalty. All of these people were trying to get her story out there for money, including the cops. There was about 3 people. They had one phone bugged and found out that they were trying to sell her story for money. Thank goodness one of them resigned and the other 2 were transferred. So that was dealt with, but then she never got any kind of fair trial after that. It made her look awful. It just, every time you do something like that, it's awful. She could have even gotten her cases overturned, but she never did. They never helped her with that. Okay. But, and you'd think this next part would be a little bit helpful, but not really. This woman contacted Aileen. Her name was, I believe, Arlene Patel? Anyway, she said that she was a good Christian woman, and when she saw her case, that she was told by God to help her and, watch after her, and they should just, help each other out. And, she kind of convinced Aileen, like, hey, we're really good friends. We should go ahead and, just live together and, have, like, a godlike relationship kind of thing. It didn't seem like there was anything sexual. But with this, Arlene decided to hire a lawyer for her because Trish Jenkins was her previous lawyer, the one that forgot to mention the fact that Richard Mallory had actually had a background with sexual abuse, and she hired a new lawyer for Aileen. Now, he was a crap lawyer, like even worse than Trish Jenkins. Like, he just wasn't doing anything right. He told her, like, one investigation after another, each victim, just plead guilty, no contest. And he was pretty much making her think like, oh, hey, this is going to be in your best interest. It's going to go ahead and work out. And each time she just kept getting a death sentence. She was just getting pissed. She's like, how many times are you going to kill me? This is just ridiculous. And I mean, I kind of get that sentence, but at the same time, you need to go to each trial to go ahead and get sentenced, one, and two, so then that way the family can get closure. I just can't believe her. Like I said, I don't know her story, but I do know the fact that she made some awful decisions. Now, Aileen had hired Steve, the lawyer, like I said, but they were doing horrible things. Like, they were encouraging Aileen to kill herself in prison. Steve and Aileen were having people who wanted to do documentaries on Aileen pay them money up to $25,000. And then they tried to deny it later, but they got them on film doing that. It was just like, you guys are so stupid. But anyway, I'm glad that it kind of ruined Steven's career because, I mean, come on, you are encouraging a client to go ahead and, plead guilty just for fame. Gonna make you look bad. At one point, when she was done with all of the trials of all of the victims except for Peter Sims, because they could not find his body and it was not like no body, no trial kind of thing. So she received 6 death sentences out of the 7 victims. And when she got in jail, there's 12,000 people who are on death row. So eventually, she was on death row for 12 years. She was there and she was getting nutty. Like, even worse than what she was. She was angry and just yelling at things and just saying weird shit. In the interviews close to her execution, she was saying weird things like, the prison has now gotten a satellite on top of the building and it is putting sonic pressure on my brain. So anytime I want to try to write a letter to my friend Dawn, only woman who actually stuck by her side and didn't try to fuck her over, anytime she would write any letters, is what she was saying, like I said, that it would just put pressure on her brain and, she just would kind of get all scrambled, and then people would accuse her of being crazy and they would try to shove drugs down her throat and all this other stuff. She was just going about this thing, and just, telling people that the cops are awful, that the prison people are just, picking favorites, and she's had to go ahead and just keep to herself, and that way she could stay out of trouble, and just, she deserves to be in prison, not lying on that. But just, I don't know, I really feel like after a while, maybe she would have tried to kill herself because she was just on the edge. She told Nick, who was in the documentary, that all of these victims were not self-defense. But she wanted to get that truth out before she ended up getting into that gas chamber to go ahead and die, essentially. But then, when she thought the documentaries weren't listening, she had confessed to Nick that all of this was self-defense, but she didn't want to say anything to anybody because she just wanted to die. She was done being in prison. She just wanted to die. So after that, it was just kind of like, okay then, I mean, what else are we going to do? But she's yelling at, Congress on the interviews, and, she's just like, you better sign that fucking warrant. I need to go ahead and die, blah, blah, blah. This is ridiculous. And then 6 months later, she finally got an execution date. And on October 9th, 2002, Aileen was executed. Her last words were, I would just like to say I am sailing with the rock and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie and all, the big mothership as well, I will be back. Well, buddy, like I said, she was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. her body was cremated and given to her friend Dawn, who actually ended up sprinkling her ashes in the farm that was over by her backyard, and this was back in Michigan when she, originally grew up. Now, I hope I was able to give you as much information as I could. This is a pretty big case. I mean, I kind of shortened it a little bit as much as I could, but it's still crazy. Even if her parents hadn't, split up and she wasn't, with her grandparents and everything, I don't know, she still lived in that same area, and, I don't know, I really still feel like it's a nature type thing. I really feel like all of this would have happened with her no matter what, but that's just my feelings. I don't know what you think, but you can come up with your own theory. But in the meantime, I want to thank you for watching my video, and I hope you see me in my next one. And in the meantime, stay weird, be safe. Bye.